Hi, I'm Dr. Mark Holacek, and I'd like to talk to you today about book banning or book burning. As you know by now, on June 16, 2018, they formally opened up a display on the life of Sally Hemings, and they opened up the south wing of Jefferson's Monticello to show where she presumably lived and to say more about her life. As I mentioned before, it's a strange choice of a slave whose life about which they want to talk, because we know next to nothing about Sally Hemings. But what was really disgusting, it seems to me, on that day is that what they did is they formally announced that Thomas Jefferson and Sally Hemings were a couple and that all of the 6 children of Sally Hemings were Jeffersons. What's the warrant for that? There isn't a warrant. In other words, the evidence that they have at their disposal today is the same evidence that they had at their disposal in 2000 when their committee came up and announced that Jefferson was very likely the father of Eston Hemings, and probably the father. So they went from probability to certainty by looking at the same evidence, and that seems to be a very, very questionable leap. It's a very large leap and certainly not warranted. In fact, I argue in my own book, Framing a Legend, that if you look at all of the available relevant evidence, and there really isn't all that much, we are warranted, more warranted in thinking that there wasn't a relationship. I think the argument from Jefferson's character speaks loudest. Nonetheless, I'm not arguing that Thomas Jefferson definitely did not have an affair with Sally Hemings. I can just tell you, I don't know. But it's a fateful day because now they are in charge of what goes on, firmly in charge of what goes on at Thomas Jefferson's own house. Now, what's the next step? There are many good books on Jefferson's anti-paternity. I will show you a couple of them here. This is Cynthia Burton's, let me get this focused here, Jefferson Vindicated. There is Bill Hyland's In Defense of Thomas Jefferson, a very good book. And the definitive book is Bob Turner's Scholars Commission Report, the Jefferson Hemings Controversy. So one of the things I worry about, and then there's my own Framing a Legend, the title indicative of, I think, what's going on right now. They certainly framed, we're framing a story. Now the story is firmly framed, and there's no reason to take the story out of its frame. Jefferson just is the father of all of Hemings' children. There's no reason to take, so one of the problems I have is what's the next step? These books that I showed you are books that don't have a large focus when they're on display at Thomas Jefferson's, at the library at Monticello. The next step, it seems to me, they're justified now for excluding these books and literally forcing you to read their literature and only their literature, which is sort of propagandist when you don't allow all the relevant literature on some topic. You don't give it an opportunity to be displayed. Now, they won't be removing my book, Framing a Legend, because it's never been on display, which is a strange thing. I've been called by numerous scholars the world's foremost authority on the mind of Thomas Jefferson. There's not without some warrant for that. None of my books, and I have 10 published, 2 going into print of those 10 on Jefferson's views on religion, one is on Jefferson's Bible. None of those books have ever been at Monticello's library. At some point, I was sort of incensed by that a few years ago, and I contacted the powers that be at the Monticello library and asked them why. And I got a simple answer back, is that they have a committee each year that decides on which books to include in the library, and my books aren't relevant. Well, let's see. This one is called Dutiful Correspondent, and it's philosophical essays on Thomas Jefferson. You can see how terrible that book is. This is a collection of essays, Thomas Jefferson and Philosophy, that I made. Here's Thomas Jefferson uncovering his unique philosophy and vision, where I talk of Jefferson's deity, cosmology. I talk about his morality, philosophy of education, and political philosophy. This is a book on Thomas Jefferson's philosophy of education. This is a book that came out in 2017, Jefferson's Political Philosophy and the Metaphysics of Utopia. Another book came out in 2017. This is Thomas Jefferson, Moralist. Here's a collection of essays I did with Brian Dotz, The Elusive Thomas Jefferson. And finally, this is the one that caused the trouble, Framing a Legend, Exposing the Distorted History of Thomas Jefferson. I suspect this because I published that book and attacked some of the leading pro-fraternity figures. I attack Fawn Brody, who's deceased right now, whose book was really scandalously fictive. I attack Annette Gordon Reed, who's considered to be the world's leading authority on the affair of Thomas Jefferson and Sally Hemings. And her book has won her a Pulitzer Prize and 17 other awards. And as I say, it's a strange thing because I don't think the relationship happened. So is it possible for someone to be the world's leading authority on some subject in that topic, in that event not ever having happened? Yeah, I guess it is. And then other people, Andrew Burstein, I attacked the Monte Carlo method by Fraser Neiman, which I think is really poorly articulated and very, very mathematically misleading. And I made demands that history be done the right way. So the problem is, to go back, is that the next step at Monticello? Are these excellent books that provide an alternative picture to the Jefferson did it view, are these going to be banned? I suspect they will, and we have to demand that not be the case. And my books should be there as well as all these other excellent books by Turner, Burton, and Bill Hyland. These books ought to be there as well, so you can have an alternative understanding of what may have happened. So, I mean, they have control of things. They've had control of things for the past 20 years, and we need to demand change. And one of the things to do is boycott Monticello. That's the biggest thing we can do. If we're not paying the exorbitant fees to go on there and get their take on Thomas Jefferson and Sally Hemings, it's actually becoming the Sally Hemings story. I have nothing against Sally Hemings. She was a beautiful woman and an important figure at Monticello. I just don't think they ever had a relationship. And if they did, even if they did, I don't think that should be the focus at Monticello. They're making it the focus, and we're losing much information about one of the true lions in American history and in world history at the time, Thomas Jefferson, a man of extraordinary depth of mind, a man of such an expansive mind as well. He was a great figure who devoted some 40 plus years of his life to public service and to helping others. And what we're getting is a picture of Thomas Jefferson as hypocrite, as racist, as bigot, and that just doesn't fly with me. We ought at least demand that other opinions be heard. That's just not the intellectual climate at Monticello. So let's demand change. Let's demand that Leslie Green Bowman and others allow for open discussion at Monticello. If not, don't go there. Thank you.